a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome to the party.
Thank you for joining us.
Turn your volume down a little bit.
Okay.
We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns on Election Day, now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
What do you think? Handshake or no handshake? No handshake, right?
Kamala Harris. Is that big?
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both.
He like kind of like
Good
sidestepped.
evening.
He
We
did
are
not
looking
want to
forward a
shake her
spirited
hand.
and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started.
I'm glad she
I wanna begin
handled that
tonight
well.
with
She
the
likes
issue
that.
voters repeatedly say is their number one
Okay,
issue,
stop.
and that
You're
is
really
the
loud.
economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you.
She should have said 4 years ago we were in the middle of the
That's an
COVID
incorrect
botch
statement. She
job.
knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars.
But he's going to be super
as you know,
general.
from China.
He's never specific.
In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We
Thanks
have
for joining,
inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago.
60,
This has
70,
been a
80%
disaster for
higher. Give me
people,
a
for the
break.
middle class, but for every
Gotta
class.
scare 'em.
On top of that, we
Thank
have
you guys for joining. Make sure
millions
you
of
guys
people pouring into our
subscribe.
country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio.
Of course,
you
it's
look
the
at
first thing he's
Aurora
gonna bring up.
in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our
Boogeyman
country.
politics.
And they're destroying our
Of
country.
course.
They're
Drop the
dangerous.
term, dude.
They're at the highest
Boogeyman
level
politics.
of criminality, and we have to
It's a
get them
great
out.
term.
We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Trump is not so
Donald
happy
Trump
with all the
left
bigger-
us
yeah, they're
the
kidding.
worst public health epidemic
There
in
we
a
go.
century.
Yeah.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on
nods.
implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read
On
it
the
purposely.
back.
I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917.
Good. He's got-
100 million people
she's
died.
got him
Has
on
there been anything like
his
it? We
record,
did a
which
is where she
phenomenal
wants
job
him.
with
Yeah.
the pandemic. We handed them over
This is gonna be a good debate.
country where the economy and where the stock
Well, she
market
got off
was
to a
higher
weird
than it was
start, but
before
it's
the
good now.
pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible.
Nobody
and people
thought. It was
give me
amazing.
credit for rebuilding the military. They give me
like,
credit for a lot of things.
the bar
but
was
not
low,
enough credit
dude.
for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and
A
many of those
soundbite.
professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth,
God.
our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid.
Uh-oh, what happened? Oh, everything just froze for me. What the heck? What the hell? Oh, I should have just refreshed it. God damn it. Just what I needed. What the hell happened? Oh, did his stream get taken down? Oh, Christ. He either just lost his internet. Well. Live right now. Okay, here we go.
Building your online business?
Screw you.
Go.
Oh my god.
Hey, sorry about that. Jesus Christ.
Oh hey. What happened?
On foreign
I
imports
lost
across the
internet
board.
at
You
my
recently
house for
said
some
that you
reason.
might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods
Hopefully I
coming
didn't
into this
get
country.
you to-
As you
hopefully
know,
you didn't
many
lose any
economists
users
say
'cause
that
of
with
me.
tariffs at that level,
No, I'm
costs are
actually
then
at 8
passed
right
on to the
now.
consumer.
Are we able to
Vice President Harris has
go back a
argued that
little
it'll mean
bit?
higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication.
want. I think we're
arguing
fine.
it costs the
3
typical
minutes or
family
so.
nearly $4,000 a year. Do
we
you
go.
believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going
You
to
wanna
have
go back?
and who's going to have higher
Yeah,
prices is
but
China.
yeah, that should be fine.
For middle-class families, in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be
I thank you guys for joining. Make
backs
sure
of
you guys
middle-class
subscribe.
people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Do you want me to go
First
regular
of all, I have
speed?
no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that.
Yes,
We're
skip-
doing
skip,
tariffs on other countries. Other countries are
About
going to finally, after
1.25, and let's skip ahead about
75
4
years,
minutes.
pay us back for all that we've done for the world.
This is like
And
towards the
the
beginning.
tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions
There we
and
go,
billions
right
of dollars, as you know, from China. And some ideas, it's no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what
Yeah,
I'm
we
going to do.
heard
Cut
this.
tax for the great
Yeah.
job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world,
Ugh,
have
we
reviewed
already
our
saw this.
relative
God damn it.
plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. I gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up, as what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. You heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it, and it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well.
He's so
but
desperate.
when you look at what she's done to our
really
country,
is.
and when you
He
look at
doesn't
these
wanna be
millions
here.
and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the
I think she
21.
likes
She's
him.
going-
It's bigger than New
she's-
York
yeah,
State
she's going
pouring in.
prosecutor.
And just look at what they're doing to our country.
Yeah.
They're
She's like, I'm
criminals.
gonna
Many of these
destroy
people
you.
coming in are criminals, and that's bad for our economy too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well,
Keep
bad
track of your
immigration is the worst
thoughts,
thing that can happen
Kamala.
to our
Don't
economy.
get
They have,
distracted.
and she has destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look
Oh
at the
my
governor of
God.
West Virginia, the previous governor
It's
of West
not
Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent
It's-
job, but the
it's
governor
bullshit.
before. He said the baby will be born, and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll
That's not
execute the
even
baby.
true.
And that's why
That's
I
not
did
even
that,
true.
because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion
most
in the
popular
9th
person in
month
the
is
race.
absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born,
Jesus
is
Christ.
okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is
Such a
something
lying
for
sack of shit.
52 years they've been
Yeah.
trying to get Roe v. Wade into the
she has
states.
every right to be
and through
disgusted.
the genius and heart
Yours.
and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on
We
it.
do like
And for the first
1.25
time,
now.
you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote.
No,
and
not
that's what
true.
happened.
That's not even
Now,
remotely
Ohio,
Not even
fucking
close
true.
true.
vote
No
was
one,
somewhat
no
liberal.
one,
Kansas,
63%
the vote
were
was somewhat
pro-life.
liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each
Pro-choice,
individual
pro-choice,
state
yeah.
is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's
pro-choice,
not tied
right,
up in the
yeah.
federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took
I mean,
courage
this
to do it.
goes
And the
back
Supreme
to, like,
Court had great
integrating
courage in doing it.
schools.
And I give tremendous
Yeah.
credit
The
to those
idea
6
that
justices.
state governments
There is no
just
state in this
sometimes
country where
get
it is
it
legal
wrong.
to kill a baby
Very
before it's
often.
born.
Literally,
Madam Vice President,
yeah.
I want to get your
And they
response
need to be
President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're
overridden
hear a
because
bunch
they
of
don't
lies,
know what's
and that's
right.
not actually a
Exactly.
surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted?
But they don't see it
Pregnant women
as
who want
the
to
woman's
carry
body.
a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Yeah, straight out of Handmaid's Tale.
Well, there she goes again.
Yeah,
it's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people.
Fifth grader on Adderall, man. He's a fifth grader on Adderall.
So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond. But I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers, to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you answer
Why-
that question?
why don't you answer
That's the
the question?
problem.
Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question,
you
would you
could
veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump,
That's
thank
ridiculous.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats,
She's
voters
gotta be a
across the
little more
board in this
emphatic
country.
about
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with
saying
getting
that
to the
that's
root causes
a
of
lie.
migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this
She's
comes
killing it.
at a time where the people of our country actually need
She's
a
doing
leader
exactly what
who
she needs to
engages
do.
in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to
Now
invite
it's
you
live.
to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go.
Oh, my
And
God.
the people
He
that do
won't
go,
let
she's
her
bussing
go.
them in and paying
She
them to be
trapped
there.
him.
Yep.
And then
fell right
showing
into it.
them in a different light. So
She's like,
she
"Oh,
can't
you
talk
bit the
about
bait.
that. People don't leave
You
my
bit the
rallies.
bait,
We
you
have the
dumb
biggest
motherfucker."
rallies, the most incredible rallies in
ego.
the history of politics.
His
That's
ego
because
can't
people
take
want
it.
to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in.
Oh my God, he's falling.
They're
he
eating
sounds-
the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a
Insane.
shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like
What
what I
even
say.
was the question?
They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals.
Fact checking.
Yeah,
immigrant
yeah,
community.
finally.
Let
me just say
I was
here,
hoping
this
that
is-
this
People on
would. Yeah.
television say my dog was taken and
People on
used for
television.
food. So
He's just
maybe
fucking
he
with-
said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Going after the
Again, the
moderators.
Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what
This
you've heard.
is glorious.
Oh, hold on,
Talk
hold on.
about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
This is how you know someone's a loser, is when they talk about how much they win.
Your deportation proposal
telltale
that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in.
It's
and all over
tired
the world,
routine, Donald. People are over it,
except
man.
here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Sure, that's not true.
Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race.
Dishing the dirt.
It is
She's dishing the
important
dirt
that we
real
move
nice.
forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric
Yep.
and address
Just like I
the
said.
needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases,
What?
it's called weaponization. Never happened in this
Immunity?
country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was
Right, because you're
involved
not
with the
weaponizing the
DOJ, from
Supreme Court.
Atlanta and Fani Willis to the
He's such an embarrassment.
Attorney General
Yeah.
of New York and the
Yeah.
DA in New York. Every
This
one
guy
of
was
those
our
cases.
president for 4
and then
years.
they
He's
say,
an idiot.
oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's
was one of your
weaponization, and they
judges,
used it,
bro.
and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election.
President
They're
Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response
It's
here,
going to be
Vice President
the
Harris,
whipped
on this notion
cream
of
on this
weaponization of
Sunday
the
is
Justice
watching him
Department.
get
Well, let's
prosecuted.
talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
This is the one that
Shut
weaponized,
up.
not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat
You're
to
such a
democracy.
child.
With the
I'm not,
Russia,
but you
Russia,
are.
Russia investigation.
We do have a lot to
No,
do.
I'm not.
Nowhere.
You
We will
are.
He
get to
almost
Lindsay.
tried. He
Vice
almost
President
tried
Harris, in your
saying
last
that
run
they
for
were
president, you
behind
said you
the
wanted to ban
assassination
fracking.
attempt
Now
on
you
him.
don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have
Here
so
we
many
go.
of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down. And name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
Well, first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens.
Son of a
and
slumlord.
Great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars. Many, many billions.
Going after
and
his
when
business.
People see it, they are even surprised.
He bit the bait
we don't
again.
have to talk about that.
Of course.
Fracking? She's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up.
What?
Very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get to.
environment that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
Yeah,
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
one
ask
of those, David, one of those people are going to be prosecuted. One of the people that burned down Minneapolis is going to be prosecuted. Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. One of those people are going to be prosecuted.
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again,
he's
it wasn't done by me. It was done by others.
probably
I said, I'd like to give
legally
you
vulnerable
10,000
there.
National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just
if
2
he
weeks
if
ago.
he
Her
admits
daughter has a
that he
tape of her
regrets
saying
something, it's kind
she
of
is
like he
fully
admits
responsible for
fault,
what
and
happened.
that
They
doesn't
wanted to
matter
get
how
rid of that
sorry
tape.
you are.
It
In
would
this
have
country,
never
all that
happened
matters
if
is whether or
Nancy
not you did it.
Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question
my
was about
God.
you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital,
They're hitting him hard
to
tonight.
desecrate
time.
our nation's
Big time.
capital. On that day,
taking a
140
beating.
law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached.
I wouldn't be surprised if he
for
flakes
exactly
on the
that
second and
reason.
third debate.
But this is not an isolated
this point,
situation.
yeah.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future.
Win by a
and
touchdown.
Not go backwards to the past.
Win by a touchdown.
just
Win
follow
by a
up here.
touchdown.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring
Yeah, he's
2025
melting
up.
down.
They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border?
Same
How come
thing.
she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what
You
I
gotta
would
mix
do,
up your
and I would be very
game.
proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because
What?
she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her
dude.
sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on,
Benito says
come on
Trump's
down to the
speaking
office,
style
let's
is like
sign a
a
bill.
browser with
If
too many
he
tabs open.
signs a bill that the border is closed,
Yeah.
all he has to do is say it to
Well
the
put.
Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them
Elections
to
are
vote. They
bad.
can't
He
even
even
speak
talks like a
English.
child.
They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
The judge looked at it.
Yes.
They said we didn't have standing. That's
no
the other
widespread
thing.
fraud. Yep.
They said we didn't have standing.
Can't let him speak. He can't let
Can you
him make that
imagine a
point.
system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing.
gonna cry
That's
victim.
how we lost. If you look at the
Oh,
facts, and
ABC
I'd love
was
to
so
have you,
mean
you'll
to
do a
me.
special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart.
Viktor Orban
Prime
sucks,
Minister
dude.
of Hungary.
Orban?
They said,
Yeah,
why
that's
is
the
the
guy
whole
you go
world
to?
blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing
Gives a
up?
fuck about Hungary.
He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. but he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office.
All she
And
has
you
to
know
do
what?
is
I'll give you a
let him
little
talk,
secret.
honestly.
He hates her. He can't stand her. But
Mr.
he
President,
got 14 million
he
votes.
hates her. He
They
can't
threw him
stand
out.
her.
She got
Causing
zero
dra-
votes.
causing
and
drama,
when she ran,
trying
she
to
was
cause
the first one
drama.
to leave because she failed. And now she's
She
running.
loves him
I don't
right now.
understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started.
Of course, that's
If I were
exactly what
president,
he's
Russia would have
so
never,
predictable.
ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years,
Yeah, there
have
was.
gone into Ukraine
Yeah, there was.
and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden,
What would you do?
she
Stop
hates
talking about
Israel.
her.
She wouldn't
What would
even
you
meet
do?
with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong
that
about
sounds
that
pretty
one.
good, actually.
She
I'm down
hates
for that.
Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people,
What?
Israel will be gone.
What?
It would have never happened. Iran
all
was
just
broke
fear.
under
He just
Donald
doesn't
Trump.
know how to do
now
it.
Iran has $300 billion because they took
he's
off
a
all
shadow
the
of his
sanctions that
former
I had.
self, dude.
Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah
Now he looks
or
like
any
the
of the
old one.
28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no
Terror?
money. It was a big story.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
a
know
New-
it.
it's a
You
New
covered
York
it very
accent.
well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen.
Oh,
Look at what's
Jesus.
going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with
How?
Ukraine and Russia ended.
How?
If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
How?
Vice President Harris, he
Ask
says
him
you
how.
hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that.
Her husband
He's
is
trying to,
Jewish.
again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it. Because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have
was
happened with
playing
me.
coy.
The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right. Let's get rid of that before we can copyright. I'll just disappear while it's going to commercial. So what do you think so far? I mean, it seems like a good old-fashioned ass-whooping by Kamala right now, and it's also it's a two-edged sword because she's doing really well, but then he's also doing horribly and not even good at counterattacking. Everything's coming across as childish. His supporters are probably finding the pieces that they want to hear, and that's enough for them. But I can't imagine anybody in the middle is hearing this and being like, yeah, I want 4 years of this fifth grader on Adderall.
No, and that's like that is the like crux of this debate. Those are the people to reach. That's the purpose of this debate. That's why it's so important. Like the undecided voter, the independents and whatnot, the people who look like, oh, who do I want out of these two people to lead the country again for the next 4 years? I don't see how anyone with half a functioning frontal lobe can look at Trump and think that's going to be that's my next president. It's like we've spoken about before in this debate. All she really needs to do is just stick to message and hold Trump accountable where possible, and just let himself dig a deeper hole for himself. And we're seeing that play out fantastically. Like, this is going a lot better than I anticipated. I mean, I expected it to go Kamala's way, but to the extent to where like she's like actively baiting him, and he literally can't help himself. Yeah, it's remarkable. It's wonderful to see, honestly.
I hope she keeps her foot on the gas. It seems like the problem with the left is that you can get bored with the self-righteousness. You can repeat the same talking points on the right and have political success, but you can't do that on the left. You have to keep it fresh and keep it interesting. So I'll be interested to see how.
No, she doesn't have to do much at all. Like, He's not answering questions directly. And she's hitting him in his ego, and that's the ticket. That's it right there. She's like getting under his skin, just by making just the most, benign, just like mundane statements. But she knows the purpose of it is to have him react.
Yeah.
Because he's a reactionary buffoon, and she knows that. I'm actually going to take a bathroom break real quick, but I'll be right back.
Go ahead. So, in keeping with what Stat Pat was talking about, where she's teasing him out to trip over his own feet, she's doing that pretty well. Wondering if there are any other major talking points she needs to make sure she hits. I feel like she's gotten all the big ones in. She got January 6th. She got all the criminal indictments and convictions. She got the border bill, even though we all wish that her position on the border would be a little bit different, is what it is. The fracking clarity, the Israel clarity, which is also disappointing on both fronts. But she seems to be in line with, I thought she started a little general, but it is a long debate. This is going to end up being 90 minutes, so I think she's pacing her presentation pretty well. I have no serious complaints yet, but like I said, there's a lot of debate left, and she has plenty of time to make a mistake, but nothing catastrophic. I think most people, because of this TV break, have checked out. I think this commercial break is really working in Kamala's favor, because people who checked out by now are, I've already seen that Kamala kicked his ass. So that I was saying that commercial break works in favor of Kamala.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if people tuned out, if that's all they see, they don't see Trump recover. If he does, I mean, it's like it can't get much worse for Trump. He's just going to repeat the same talking points.
Are the commercials like Harris campaign ads? Is that what they were? No? Oh.
Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up.
God,
Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to
Nobody's
take this to
really
Vice
voting.
President
Unfortunately,
Harris. I want to get your
nobody's really
thoughts
voting on that.
Support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up.
Yeah.
And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean. Because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen, for years we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO.
I question the New York Times polls that everyone's worried about, but I'm still worried.
If you don't pay,
because Morning Consult did a poll that we'll talk about.
He said it was one of the most
I love how we just don't even care what he's saying. I don't even care what he's saying anymore.
I want to turn to Afghanistan.
It's all the same
in the
bullshit.
first hour of the debate.
It's the same
and we
crap
witnessed
all the
a poignant
time,
moment
dude.
today on Capitol Hill.
It's like
honoring
a
the
bad
soldiers who
stand-up
died
routine
in
that
the chaotic
everyone's seen
withdrawal from
before.
Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan.
It's going to be messy
4
no matter what.
presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today,
Jesus
there is not
Christ, that's a
one
lot of money.
member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by
Guy's a
Mike
poet,
Pompeo.
man.
It was a very good agreement. The
White
reason
trash
it was
poet.
good,
Eloquent.
it was, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, They blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country.
Oh, this will be
Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote,
Jesus
I didn't know
Christ.
she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I have no thoughts on
I
this.
think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says.
He wants her to be
she
Biden
is Biden.
So
the
bad.
worst inflation we've ever had.
He really wishes he
a
was there.
horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time's up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald
He
Trump.
looks so defeated.
And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on
to
to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond.
President Trump,
No, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
going
just need
to move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up.
You
They
didn't
wouldn't vote
propose
for
anything,
it.
dude.
I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot?
Thank you guys for joining
And I
in.
felt
Make sure
I
you
had
guys
an
subscribe.
obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration.
Yeah, a lot of
We
them
read
are
about the
involved with
bad ones. We had
Project
some real
2025.
bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing.
No, you
But
didn't.
it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will
was
do
saved by
is
John
we're looking
McCain.
at different plans. If we can come up with a plan
He
that's
wanted
going
to
to
repeal
cost
it.
our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system.
Oh,
2
shit.
years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous
go.
lying about this stuff.
There you go.
As it relates to the Affordable
Be
Care Act,
direct about it.
understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a
There we go.
senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night.
Playing to the
Walked
anti-Trump
onto the Senate
Republicans
floor
pretty
and
hard right
said,
now.
No, you don't.
Big time. It's gonna
No,
happen.
you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass as
President
prologue
Harris,
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a
of...
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what?
What?
We can do much better than Obamacare, much
Then why
less
did-
He's
money.
tired.
But she
He's
will
tired now.
improve
Yeah.
private insurance for people.
trying to get the
private
last
medical
word in.
insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump.
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants
Most
in
people have
Mexico.
tuned out by
in
now.
many cases
Yeah.
owned by China. They're building these
I love how they
massive
shave
plants,
climate
and they
change
think
for
they're
the
gonna
tail
sell their
end.
cars into the United States
More
because
explosive
of
moments
these
were during the
people.
first half
What they
anyway.
have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country,
Which
because they will
American
kill
people will pay for
United
anyway, 'cause
Auto
you don't know how
Workers
it
and
fucking
any
works.
auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible.
Yeah, that's right,
We
Dragon
have
Slayer.
nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different
You're
countries.
not
And then
debating
you wonder,
Biden. That
why
says
is he
something-
so loyal
Oh my
to this
God.
one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he?
This
Why
is
did he get
whiny
$3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News.
Oh, man.
All right, so here we are, baby.
Yeah,
Coming into closing statements. If people, thank you for continuing to watch with us. This is Left Coast Live. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's interesting at this point because you know that she's done really well. She just is clear sailing all the way to the finish line for this debate. And I think you're going to see, if there are second and third debates, you'll probably see a huge decline in ratings over the second and then subsequently the third. I think people are tired of this. People who haven't been paying attention are like, oh, well, Kamala's not so bad. That's kind of what they're going for. You know, the Kamala's not so bad. I don't want to go through Trump again.
Yeah, I mean that's the least you can expect, and like the most you could hope for a significant portion of the electorate to begin with. This, I mean, this is exactly what needed to happen.
Right.
Trump on the back foot the entire time, rambling incoherently, going off on different tangents, not staying on topic, and her just saying what needs to be said, just pointing out the obvious, and just being just a modicum of consistency with her messaging, her tone, and her demeanor, so to speak. And it's going to play very, very well. This is I'm very, very, very pleased with this debate. It's a great performance from her because like it doesn't take much to get under his skin, and he clearly doesn't want to be there. I mean, the best way to like summarize this is like he absolutely hates her guts, doesn't like the fact that he's even there, whereas she's just loving this. But she has to kind of contain herself. You can see her reactions to some of the things that he's saying, and
no, she's loving that she gets to be the one to take down Donald.
Oh,
she's loving it.
Absolutely. And like, who better? Like, she's like, I mean, she's got the prosecutorial record to boot, and just knows how to get him exactly where she needs him to be. And it's quite a talent. It's quite an ability. It's very impressive. And now she just needs to sail to the finish. And what I want her to do for her closing statement is like not only just make her case, but also just say like, now Trump is going to feed you a bunch of bullshit. He's going to whine. He's going to complain. He's going to make you scared. He's going to feed you all this fear, because that's the way he operates. I think that would play very well because he's a very predictable fucking person.
Yeah, I like how she called out his tactics and said,
Yes.
"You're going to hear a lot of this tonight. You're going to hear a lot of this tonight." Preemptive strike.
Yes.
Very smart. Yeah, no, she was prepped and she's very well prepared. Isn't it nice to have someone who's got a pretty sharp mind up there and not someone who's pushing 80 or over the hill with 80?
Yeah.
I mean, my God, it's kind of embarrassing that we were in that place to begin with, but here we go. Here comes potentially 8 years of Kamala the Chameleon.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to get.
And I've been like casually just like checking in on I've been like live tweeting, but I've also been seeing like on my following tab, there are a lot of things that like were really big stand-up moments. Like, wow, he said that, or he said that. It's like this is going to be extensively covered, I think, because of just how batshit insane Trump was tonight, without a doubt. And like, I don't know how they're going to even defend a lot of the things that he's been saying.
Yeah.
You know, he's just made the mess even bigger, like for his apologists, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's right. Things have gotten worse for the GOP because of this debate, not better. That's for sure.
No, of course. Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how conservatives spin this.
Of course. They're going to try to make it all about her and,
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Final.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was the DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question.
Talk about what are you going to do?
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
All right.
Well, yeah, I mean, his closing statement was predictable, but also just completely fucking unhinged. Just grievances.
Yeah, I mean, well, what happens for people who aren't aware is when people get over 70, 75, 80, they recess back into a more primitive version of themselves
Yeah.
unless they're really enlightened and have worked on themselves a lot over the course of their life.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. And he is going back into becoming more of a child and acting out like he's going to win this thing by invoking the same old talking points that worked 8 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he I mean, to the extent that he even prepared for this, like, he just really wishes that was Biden. He did not want to be here. He just was completely drained and lifeless, and just he looked fucking miserable. You know,
Yeah.
all he can do is just ramble on like as much as he possibly can, just fill the room with hot air and think that that's going to sell, and it just doesn't anymore. And like he wasn't nearly as diverse in his explanations as Harris, not even remotely close. She went into far more detail and was a lot more direct, and he couldn't be that. He just let whatever she underhanded through his way get under his skin and just take off running with that instead of stay focused and just go into detail. Like, she's right. He doesn't have a plan for anything. He was quoted like he actually said at one point, "I have a concept of a plan. I have a concept of something like that." It's like, what? Like, you don't have you. That's it. You haven't you haven't sat down and thought out anything. It's because he doesn't care. He doesn't give a fuck. He just wants to be the winner. He just wants to complain and just bend everybody towards his whim. And like, it's like we've even talked before. He's already laying out the groundwork for denying the election results if he loses. Like, that's his game plan.
Yeah. Well, at least he's not the sitting president this time, so the efficacy
Yeah.
of that kind of maneuver would probably work out. I wanted to take us to the polls that everyone's nervous about. So this is the national poll. Harris is up 2.7% on average, according to 538. So the New York Times Siena College poll, that's the one that everybody was worried about because it's got Trump up 2. And it was a very large poll, and of course it's got the New York Times credibility. But based on some of their polls, I don't know how accurate they are because you've got Big Village here and Morning Consult and Activote all giving Harris pretty healthy leads, especially one of those big Village polls.
Yeah,
So
Mario Console with like a 10,000 sample size. That's pretty
yeah,
damn significant.
and it was done in 3 days. You want to see it done in a short period of time. It's better to see a poll that was done in like 2 or 3 days as opposed to a poll that was done in 10 days.
Yeah, so far, within the last few weeks, that New York Times Siena College poll is like the only one that has shown Trump with a slight lead. So I'm not terribly concerned about it, but I mean, after all, it is just a national poll. Ultimately, what is going to matter is the swing state polls.
All right, let's take a look at them. Pennsylvania, let's start with the most important one. Pennsylvania, Morning Consult, Harris up 3. That's encouraging.
Yes.
YouGov but that Morning Consult poll was a 12-day poll. So you've got to be a little bit cautious there. Redfield and Wilton has it even in 4-way action. Yeah, just you can't take anything for granted. Pennsylvania looks a little soft right now for Kamala. Remember, those 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, have gone the same way in every election since 1988. So let's do Wisconsin. Harris is up pretty comfortably here, 2.7 on average.
That's good.
And then Morning Consult has her up 3. Trafalgar, you can never trust Trafalgar.
No, of course.
And then Morning Consult has her up 3. Redfield and Wilton has her up 3 in 4-way action. So Wisconsin looks good. Another one that looks good is Michigan, where Harris is up 1.9 on average, but looking at that morning consult poll, she's up 3.
Yeah.
So she's in good shape according to the morning consult polls. I'm not worried about Michigan or Wisconsin, as is the case. But let's move on to the other big dog, Georgia, where Trump is supposedly up by 0.6 of a point. And the latest morning consult poll has Harris up 1. Everything else, though, has Trump up, or Active Vote's most recent poll, which was only 400 likely voters, has it at even. So
over the course of a month, too. That's crazy.
yeah, why did it take him so long to get that many people to respond? It's like kind of
Yeah.
useless when it's that many over the course of a month. It's
Right.
kind of useless. So that's that, and let's do North Carolina. So you can't give Georgia to Kamala. Like that's my point is that it's still wide open. Morning consult even, dead even in North Carolina. Quinnipiac and Redfield. By the way, Quinnipiac had Kamala down earlier in the same poll about a month ago. So her trajectory in North Carolina looks really good. North Carolina actually looks like a little bit more solid, than Georgia.
Yeah, because if you look at that Quinnipiac poll for here in North Carolina, it has Harris up, whereas in Georgia, if I remember, I think it had Trump up. The same poll, Quinnipiac in Georgia. It might have been.
Yeah, I had Trump up. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so.
So it looks like North Carolina might be the new Georgia this election.
Right. Right.
And then let's go to the other big one, but it's not enough on its own, nor is it enough plus Nevada. Arizona plus 0.6 of a point for Trump. Redfield has Trump up 1. Morning Consult has Trump up 2. So fair to say, just go ahead and let go of Arizona and to an even greater extent let go of Nevada because those arithmetically just don't matter as much.
Well,
so she's going to hammer North Carolina and Pennsylvania coming down the stretch. She's going to hammer those two states.
I mean, regardless, there is still about 7 weeks until the election, so they're going to be busy, and they still do have a shitload of money on hand. So they're going to be doing phone banking. They're going to be canvassing. They're going to be putting out ads in these swing states. Race isn't over until it's over, but I think we're seeing these polls as a reflection of RFK dropping out and endorsing Trump because he did have a significant enough following behind him to where it is making a bit of a difference. So he's you can see it reflect in these polls, him starting to catch up a little bit. But we'll see if he the post-debate polls show differently. Because it's still 7 weeks away, and a lot can change. And of course, there's still the other debates, and of course the Walz-Vance debate as well. So, yeah, a lot of work to do.
Yeah, man, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I don't really have any other parting thoughts than it should see at least a 1 to 2 point bump for Harris across all these polls, but these polls are all over the place, so it's hard to kind of get a feel for. It's like I'll be comfortable when the conservative polls start to show that Harris has a lead, and they finally admit it.
Yeah, not to mention, I mean, these polls shouldn't be looked at as the end all be all to begin with.
I still want to hear win by a touchdown because I want that number 7 in people's minds when they're looking at polls. It's like if it doesn't say 7, if it doesn't say Harris plus 7 in the polling, don't be comfortable. Still talk to people and get them out to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to mention, just newly registered voters, getting people out who are unlikely voters, people who have never voted before. That's encouraging. Those numbers have been significant in a lot of these states, but more can be done. Convincing even apolitical people who aren't even don't follow politics, just the stakes. I mean, it could be as simple as: would you rather have, a liberal prosecutor cop mom with a significant career behind her, or a fifth grader on Adderall who won't stop whining. It could be as simple as that. Like that's what the choice comes down to, ultimately.
All right, well, Stat Pat Stateless Patriot, I am Dieter McBusiness, and we are reminding you that you don't get change in America by asking nicely. We'll see you again soon. Thanks
Absolutely.
for watching.
Have a good night.